Hi Lakewood Math 1 students, this is Miss V and this is the 8th video in the series on linear functions. Today we're going to be talking about the point-slope formula, which is a little less intuitive than the other two, the standard form and slope-intercept form, but it actually ends up being very useful and kind of elucidating on down the line. So I'd like you to pause the video in just a second and grab your agenda and do me a favor. About April 9th, I think that's the day we return from spring break, I'd like you to put a little note on April 9th and remember to ask me why point-slope formula is so very important. And I think by that time in our study of math, it will make sense to you why it's such a useful form. So let's get on with point-slope form. It looks like this. It is y minus y1 is equal to our slope m times x minus x1. And I'm going to do two problems and then let you do 3 through 6 on your own. So right here, I always label these because if I don't, I get confused. This is x1 and y1. And I have y minus y1, which is 1, is equal to 2 times x minus x1, which is 4. Now, one thing that students always ask me is that you still have an x and y in your equation, and yes, I do. Those are the variables that stay in the equation y equals mx plus b. You'll see that when we change this into slope-intercept form. And these, or this guy, is the y and the x that I have in the point that I've been given. So I'm going to turn this into y equals mx plus b form. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm first going to distribute my 2 on the right-hand side. So I get 2x minus 8. And then I need to add 1 to both sides. And I notice when I do that, conveniently I have my y on my left and I have everything else on my right, and this looks like y equals mx plus b. So I notice that my slope is 2 and that ended up in the right spot. A way I can check and see if I'm correct is to go ahead and put this point in and see if it makes a true statement. So if I put a 4 in here, 2 times 4 minus 7 is 8 minus 7. And that does in fact equal 1, the y value that I was given in the problem. Let's look at problem number 2. I have y minus y1 is equal to 1/2, which is my slope, times x minus x1. Oops, that's the point. First step is always to distribute on the right-hand side. So I have 1/2 x minus 1 and y minus 4 on the left-hand side. And again, I'm going to add 4 to isolate y, and I get y equals 1/2 x plus 3. My slope is 1/2, and that's what ended up right there where m is. And let's see if this point satisfies this equation. If I put in a 2 here, I should get 4. 1/2 times 2 is 1, plus 3 is equal to 4. So I check out. So pause the video right now, do problems 3, 4, 5, and 6 on your own, and check your answers. And here is the key so you can check your answers. Make sure to ask good questions if this is confusing for you. So turn your page. Sometimes we're given 2 points. We aren't given the slope. And so what we need to do is we need to use those 2 points to find the slope first. So the slope formula, remember, is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And then once we do know m, we can use y minus y1 is equal to our slope times x minus x1. Let's see how that works in this first problem. I'm going to label this x1, y1, and this is x2, y2. And I'm first going to use my slope formula and say y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And this gives me negative 8 over positive 2, because 1 minus negative 3 is, oops, no, that's 4. 1 minus negative 3 actually ends up being 1 plus 3. So there we get a slope of negative 2. Now I have enough information to use the point slope formula to go ahead and find the equation of my line. So I'm going to do y minus y1, which is 7, is equal to my slope of negative 2 times x minus x1. And let's just call that plus 3 because I'm subtracting a negative there. So we distribute. That's our first step. Negative 2x minus 6 on the right-hand side. And this is y minus 7 on the left. And now let's add 7 to both sides, giving us negative 2x plus 1. I think that's right. And again, I would encourage you to check and see if you're correct by putting in these x values. For example, negative 3 times negative 2 is positive 6, and then when I add 1, I get 7. So that's a good check. Here, if I insert 1, I get negative 2 times 1 plus 1. And negative 2 plus 1 happens to be negative 1. So I can go ahead and check that both of those points are on my line. Let's do one more together, and then you can practice on your own. I always label my points because if I don't, I get confused. So that's going to be x1, y1, and x2, y2. And I use my slope formula, negative 4 minus negative 7 over 3 minus negative 6. So this is negative 4 plus 7, which gives me 3. And this is 3 minus negative 6, which gives me 9, I think, right? 3 plus 6. So I know my slope here is 1/3. I'm going to simplify this fraction to be 1/3. Now I use my point slope formula. Y minus y1 is equal to my slope times x minus x1 is negative 6. Notice since I've got negative values here and I'm subtracting them, it means addition. So I changed the sign here in both situations because these are negative numbers. And if you have questions about that, please ask. That's kind of important. Now let's distribute. I think 1/3 of 6 is 2. And I'm going to subtract 7 from both sides. Oops, I need an x there. And this should be the equation of my line. And again, I would encourage you to double check by inserting these points and making sure that they satisfy the equation here. So pause the video. Do problems 9, 10, 11, and 12. In just a moment, I'll put up the answers for you. And here are the answers to 9 through 12. There you go, Lakewood Math 1, under 10 minutes.